Welcome to the Storyboards Creativecast. I'm Jen Clark-Hall, and in each episode I'll be chatting to inspirational people working in the creative industries who will share their career stories and advice. If you want to know more about creative careers, are thinking about starting up a creative business, or just want something interesting to listen to for half an hour, this is the podcast for you. Today we're talking with Alex McIntosh, artist, printer and studio technician at Northern Print in Newcastle. Welcome to the podcast, Alex. It's great to be talking with you today. Thank you so much for coming on to the Creativecast and talking with us. We'll start off, if you could give us a brief introduction to who you are and what you do.
Of course. Thanks for inviting us on. I'm Alex McIntosh. I'm an artist and a printmaker, and as you mentioned, I'm one of the studio technicians at Northern Print. So I guess to talk a little bit about Northern Print, my employer. So it's a not-for-profit gallery and printmaking studio. They have a couple of different mandates. I'll probably say the main two are sort of showcasing the very best of contemporary printmaking, and also facilitating and enabling artists to make work. So printmaking tends to require big bits of kit, amount of space or space specialist equipment and facilities. So we have that space and that equipment. So we have artists come in that pay a membership to use the studio and to use our bits of equipment. My role as the studio technician is to maintain the equipment that we have and to make sure that it's used correctly, to help with any technical queries that the people using the studio might have, and that might be to do with the equipment, or it might be technique based on their side of things, so how to ink up something or something like that. And also in normal times we teach printmaking classes. However, that's taken a pause for obvious reasons at the moment.
And how do you fit your work as an artist and printmaker around your other role at Northern Print?
So I'm part-time. Printmaking has quite a lot of prep to it. So when I'm not in work, I'm either at home prep, doing sketches that then become prints, or I'm in Northern Print on my days off, sort of printing or making or all that kind of stuff.
And what's your preferred print processes? Because I know there's printing is it's a broad term really for lots of different types of artwork, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. It's a bit of a catch-all. I've got a bit of a short attention span, so I tend to flick between process to process, and I tend to have lots of different plates spinning. So if something isn't quite working, or if I want to take a break from something, I'll move to a different process. Certainly at the moment, I've been doing quite a lot of screen printing, but I feel like I'm going to take a little bit of a break from screen print and maybe move back to photo etching and solar plate, which has been a while since I've done some.
So what brought you to printmaking in the first place?
Well, I was doing a foundation in fine art, and foundations, for people that haven't done one or don't know the basics of what it involves, is they basically take you through all different disciplines to give you a sense of what they are, and basically give you a taste of everything. And I came across printmaking then, and fell in with printmaking for very much the same reason that everybody else does, which is there's a sort of element of surprise. So you're investing all this time making a plate or making up a screen or your sketches, and there's that element of surprise where you pull the print, you lift up the blankets of a press, or you lift the screen bed and you see the press, you see the print, and it's that kind of like opening a present at Christmas. It's kind of that nice little surprise that kind of gets you hooked.
It can be different every time. I've gotten into printing, and I've done a couple of courses with you, Alex, and you've been there on hand in the studio when I've been there. And it is a case of when you do a print and you have perhaps, well, maybe this is just me, but I have an idea in my head of what I want it to look like, but when it actually comes out, it maybe looks slightly different, and I'm like, and I'm surprised by that. But sometimes it's quite a nice surprise because it's either turned out better or it's turned out quite different, but it's still quite nice and still quite interesting still.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, the more you do, the more you work with a process, the more you get a sort of an understanding of, oh, I think it's going to come out like this.
Mm-hmm.
But there's always a little bit of unknown to it. Personally, I always try not to have a fixed idea of what the final outcome is going to be. And when I plan prints, I allow that flexibility because I think it's the happy accidents that really make the print.
So what you did your art foundation, fine art foundation, was that an undergrad degree or was that a 1 year thing?
It was 1 year. It was an undergrad though. It was at Blackpool and Fylde College. And yeah, it was a great course.
And after that, did you go on to do a more sort of specialized course?
Yeah, so I did I did a degree at Manchester Met, which was in fine art, but again, I found myself specialising in printmaking. And then after that, I did a master's. It was just at the start of the financial crisis, and I was lucky to have a little bit of money saved. So I thought instead of looking for a job when they were quite scarce, I thought I'd invest the time and money in doing a master's, and that was at Preston UCLan, University of Central Lancaster.
What do you feel that by doing the masters, what do you think that gave you in terms of, did it give you a better understanding of how you wanted to progress in a career?
I think most of all, it was having the time to work with the processes. The technicians were always very generous with their time, so I'd probably say the masters was the most, probably out of all the three, it's the one that I feel like I developed the most. I got a sense of where I wanted to go, and probably where I learned the most as well.
And do you think it kind of gave you a bit more, like I say, you gained a better understanding of the different processes, but do you think it gave you any more confidence as a freelance artist to be an artist in your own right, rather than going into just any other area or any other job?
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I think the more you do a thing, the more confident you get at it naturally. So I certainly feel like I became more confident as an artist, and being surrounded by peers that were confident in their practice and things like that also I found helped.
Yeah. And what sparked your interest in creativity and art and design in general prior to that? So was there something as you were growing up or something at school that really kind of hooked you into creativity?
Well, I'd say that's something that I naturally enjoyed as when I was growing up, the act of drawing or just generally making texture or just being creative. I was quite lucky. My parents took me to quite a few different galleries and museums just to sort of fill up time. I guess they didn't know what to do with me, so get out of the house and go to a gallery or museum. So I guess I was exposed to that kind of stuff naturally, which kind of made me more interested in it, which, yeah.
You say you graduated in the financial crash, so that was like 2008. So you've been doing this for well over 10 years now.
Yeah.
What keeps you passionate and motivated to do the things that you do every day?
There's a couple of things really. So there's on the working with others and artists making prints, it's the getting to seeing them use the processes that I love, and seeing them fall in love with the processes. But there's also the artists that are familiar with the processes and getting them, seeing how they use them. And I think there's always the case that I'm learning and picking stuff up from them as well.
Every day will be different for you because it'll be different people coming into the studio. And like you say, when you're doing your own stuff and when other people are doing, and you're watching other people do their things, their outcomes will always be different. And it's one of those things, unlike with I suppose a digital print that you can print off on an electronic printer, it's always going to be the same. You're always going to get that same outcome unless the toners are low or there's something wrong with the ink. But doing that sort of hand done process, there's always a margin of not necessarily error, but a margin for where things can be different. every single time.
Yeah, very much so.
And I guess that's what adds to the intrigue and the excitement of what it is that you
Yeah,
do.
yeah. It's just getting to see people engaging with the process.
Yeah. I mean, is there anything in particular that you go back to time and time again to look for influences for your work or inspiration for when you're doing your own things?
Well, the way I tend to make my work is I'll have a starting point, which is normally going out, taking sketches or photographs, and then I find that the printmaking is quite rigid in the sense that you have to have work in a particular way. So instead of having that like a blank page and staring at a blank page and not quite sure where to go, you have like a starting point as, oh, if I'm going to turn this into an etching, I need to do this. And then the act of going through that process then changes the original source image. The processes are the inspiration. I find them, that's what inspires me, working with the process.
So it's a kind of, as you go along, different things emerge.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, and like I mentioned earlier, I always try and have a bit of flexibility in the way that what the outcome's going to be. So not having a fixed idea and allowing the process to change the original sketches and photos.
That's a really unique thing about creativity, isn't it? Is that you kind of have to be open to things evolving as you're doing it, because there can be things outside of your control, and then, like you say, all of a sudden something can come to you. Because I know as a school teacher, I would often be teaching a structured lesson from a lesson plan, and then something would come into my brain and I'd be like, oh, we should be talking about this, and we should be doing this, and let's go and do this experiment. And it would go off on a tangent, but it is related. And it's quite nice having that freedom to be able to explore the creativity of whatever it is that you're doing. Thinking about what you do as a job at Northern Print, but also as an artist and a printmaker, what's the best thing about both sides of what you do?
I quite enjoy the teaching side of things at Northern Print. Again, coming back to just seeing people work with the process and them discovering it for themselves, it reminding me of when I was first discovering them. I find working through a process quite relaxing. There's almost something quite meditative about it.
Yeah.
So once you really get it, when you're auditioning a print and you really get into the zone, and it's quite meditative, just with the example of screen printing, just putting the paper underneath the bed, pulling the print, taking it off, that kind of repetition I find quite meditative. And the same for if you're doing an etching. Yes, I find that quite relaxing and enjoyable.
Yeah, I know when I started doing the screen prints, it was exactly the same for me, because it was, I guess, at a time when I felt like I needed something that I was able to focus on and that I could do with those methodical stages, and that I didn't need to, of course I had to think about it, because it was all quite new to me. But like you say, once you got the process down and you did the print in the first color, you put the print, you took it out, you put it on the bed to dry, and then you put the next one in and did the print, and then so on. And it does become this sort of rhythm. And in my head, I was thinking I should be singing some sort of sea shanty as I'm doing this to go with the rhythm of that. Is there anything that about the things that you do that either you find challenging or frustrating or not as enjoyable as the other bits?
So one of the parts of Northern Print, my role at Northern Print, is done a tiny bit of co-publication and a tiny bit of auditioning for other artists. It's something that my colleague does a lot more of. And it's probably the most challenging thing that I have done. Sometimes you'll get an artist come into the studio and they'll want to make an image or a print, and they're not quite sure what process it is. So you've got to figure out what they want the final image, the final print to be. So you're kind of figuring out what process is going to be best. So there's quite a lot of managing expectation as to what the final thing is going to look like. There's quite a lot of communication and trying to get across what they want, but also saying about how it's going to come out and how a certain process has this kind of qualities. So it's kind of this minefield of back and forth.
So when you say editioning, just so it's clear what you mean, do you mean producing a run of an amount of?
Yes, very much so. Yeah. So if you're editioning your own work or making a series of prints in edition for yourself, if something changes or something happens and it's not to the plan, you can figure out yourself that, oh, actually I can take that. I like the way that that's going. But because you're making work for someone else, you're very much having to think, is this the pinnacle and the best way that it could be done? And is this what this person's going to want?
There's a little bit of pressure.
Yeah, it's very much a completely different mindset. So that's most certainly the most challenging work I've ever done there.
And if you're wanting to start something new, or if you are when you are doing workshops with new people to printing or studio users, and they weren't feeling particularly creative, and they were having creative block, and they just couldn't think of how to get over that. What do you do, or what do you advise people to do to get over that creative block?
Well, I guess if it's myself with creative block, the way I tend to deal with it is to just keep making. So be it small little sketches or working on finishing an edition, just the act of making tends to generate more ideas. And setting aside a time where I do something creative or print based and not getting distracted by anything else, it is just for that time. And say if I'm in my studio and I've set myself an hour making sketches, it might be the case that no sketches happen, but I don't get distracted by emptying the dishwasher or anything like that. It's I'm sat at the desk, either drawing or not drawing, but that time is just for being creative. If that makes sense.
Yeah. And do you feel under pressure when you're at your desk to do something, or is it quite? Do you feel quite relaxed in that state? Are you comfortable just being in that environment, but not necessarily producing something, perhaps?
It changes from day to day. Sometimes it might be the case that if the sketch really isn't working, that I do some more printmaking research. So I've got a couple of printmaking books, so I'll look through those and try and refresh my knowledge on printmaking. But yeah, I try not to put pressure on myself. Yeah.
You always come across as a very calm influence, especially in the studio. I remember talking, I was like, why has this happened with this one? And you'd be like, well, that's just printmaking.
Some of it is, and it's just there's an element of problem solving to printmaking. So
yeah,
if this is happening, then it could be this or this. So you just change one small thing and see if that rectifies it. And if it doesnn't, then you keep that thing the same, but change another. It's one thing when it's your own work, but it's another when you're sort of removed from it. Because often when I'm in the middle of something and it's not working, you just have to put it down and move on to something else. So I mentioned earlier that working on several different things at once. If something's just not working, then there's no point at banging your head against the wall and wasting materials trying to really figure it out. Sometimes it's just best to stop and move on to something else.
And I think that's really good advice to think about it, is to not put yourself into pressure when you're in that, when you've given yourself that time frame and you've set that sort of sacred time aside to do something. It doesn't matter what it is, whether it's research by looking through a book, you're still actively exploring. And then also, if it's not working, it's fine. And that was one of the questions that I've recently started to think about, that I should be exploring more in these interviews, is what role does failure play in your creativity? Because that's a massive thing.
It's a huge part of creative play, I'd say, and even printmaking. It's the happy accidents that if something veers off and doesn't quite come out the way you expect, there's always something to take away from those failures, in sort of inverted commas.
Yeah, maybe we need to flip the word, or just forget the word failure altogether, because like you say, things always come out of it. So it can't be a failure if you're learning from it, and if it's something that you actually gain something from, because people see failure as a loss.
Yeah, I mean, even if you don't, for example, print, if you don't feel the print is particularly successful, say if one area is underwiped and you're not getting a solid tone, you're getting a bit of texture, that way of creating a bit of texture might come into play elsewhere on a different project. So if you're not getting something from that particular print, it can always come into something much later.
Thinking about the way your career has gone to date, and your own work and the various places that you have worked, what are you most proud of? Whether that's something that you have done personally, or whether it's something that you've done as part of a collective or in Northern Print.
I guess a couple of things come to mind. So Northern Print does a print biennale. So I was pretty proud to be involved in that. There was a collaborative screen printed mural that went outside the building at the time, which helped print, which I am pretty proud of. Collaboration wise, when I was at UCLan, University of Lancaster in Preston, I swapped some prints with David Arms, who's a letterpress artist. We sort of swapped prints, and then kind of the project went on for a little bit and things got in the way. And recently he got back in touch, and he'd done something with my offcuts of prints, and he made it into this really beautiful artist book called Presents. Quite a small edition, but it's a really beautiful thing, and really you're proud of how my offcuts have been used, but to what he's done with the prints. It's a really lovely thing.
So that must be quite satisfying to see your work being produced in that way and presented in that booklet alongside someone that you admire and respect.
Very much so. It was quite a surprise as well. It was really lovely surprise.
Thinking about the word creativity, because I've interviewed quite a few different people in a few different job roles and a few different disciplines. I'm sure creativity means different things to everyone. So what do you think creativity means to you?
I guess creative is the act of making, I guess. Being flexibility of whatever you do, being creative in it. So I guess it doesn't necessarily have to be in the arts, but a creativity to be flexible and to work around things, I guess. If that all makes sense.
Well, I mean, there's no right or wrong answer, is there, really? Because it'll mean something different to everyone. So I guess for me, the word creativity would mean exploration and, exploring what's possible, and kind of going in towards innovation, being creative with things that perhaps already exist to make new things that don't exist. So I think that's a question I want to continue asking to get people's perspective on things. And it's interesting what you were saying about creative block, in that, you just continue doing something, whether it's big or small, or, thinking or drawing, it's you doing something. And that's what most people's answer has been to that question. But I think there are some questions like, what does creativity mean to you? It'll be different, be quite different from person to person. Thinking about the last year and a half, it's been an incredibly difficult time, particularly for the creative industries, for the entertainment industries, and for places like Northern Print particularly, because you've not been able to be open to studio users or open to visitors, and you've not been able to continue the workshops that you were doing. What have you had to do over the last year and a half to kind of adapt your working practices during that time?
Like I say, printmaking requires quite big bits of kit and amounts of space. So I haven't been able to do much printmaking, but it does require quite a lot of prep. I normally say that particularly screen print is 90% prep and 10% printing. So it's been lots of prep, so lots of sketches and breaking images into different layers so that I can turn them into screen prints. I've also been relearning a bit of bookbinding as well, so experimenting with that. As for Northern Print, we've been what's more digitally based. So we've been doing things like Printmakers coffee hours. So getting our members involved to come onto Zoom and just chat about being creative and making work, and just generally talking about stuff and being a bit of a community, because we've got quite a big membership, and it's nice just to, even if it's not talking about printmaking, talk about just random things. It's because print studios tend to be meeting points of lots of different people from different backgrounds and different disciplines. It's always nice to just have chats about random things.
Yeah, and those people will have missed those opportunities and missed
Very
that
much
kind
so,
of
yeah.
camaraderie.
Yeah, it's a bit more of a communal space. It's not like you're working in a studio by yourself. It's a communal space basically. So
Yeah, I think every time I've been in to use the studio, there's always been someone else in there. Even when we've had the restrictions, and there's been at least one other person who's been able to be in there safely, and I've always ended up talking to them, and it's really interesting to see what people are doing there in the first instance, like whether they're professional printmakers or just there purely for leisure and or learning a new skill. There's always someone to talk to, and it's nice that every time I've been in there, they've always asked for my opinion, even though I'm not a professional printmaker or even very experienced at all. They've still valued.
Perspective is always important. It's always good to have a different pair of eyes on a thing.
Yeah.
Going back to what we were doing during the pandemic, we've been doing sort of one-to-one Zooms with people that are printing from home and have technical queries. So kind of problem solving over Zoom. We've been doing a sort of a collaborative choreograph project. So I think we decided on a Lowry painting and broke it up into little squares, and everybody gets a square and create a little choreograph. And we're actually just getting them back now. So they're all going to be inked up and printed so that you end up with a big, I think it's double elephant, so it's A1, maybe a little bit larger, print of this Lowry painting.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
That sounds like a really cool project. And there's been something just come out recently, hasn't there, for the members, a call out for work?
It's up to, I think you can submit up to 3 prints, and it's 30 by 30 centimetres, or I forgot what it is in inches. I want to say 12 by 12 inches. On the theme of nature and how we engage with nature. And I think the project ends the end of June, and they'll go up in the gallery.
Because that sounded really fascinating, because everyone's been spending more time outdoors, haven't they?
Yeah, very much so. It should be quite interesting to see what everybody comes up with. I've seen bits and bobs that members have been doing, so yeah, I think it should be quite a nice little exhibition. And
looking forward with a sort of positive mindset, in that, you know, everyone's being vaccinated. Hopefully COVID numbers are coming down, and we'll begin to be able to open up and have a bit more freedom and flexibility in working and getting back to the creative side of things again at Northern Print. How do you see the reopening of things happen? Do you have things in the pipeline that you are working towards at Northern Print?
Yeah, so at the moment we've had to reduce the amount of members that use the studio. So kind of we've broken it up in the studio into different sections. So I think it's kind of max 5-6ish kind of people in the studio. And I'm not sure how long that's going to go on for. It might be the case it goes on into next year, but who knows what the future holds really. One thing I will say is it's really nice seeing the studio being used again. It was during lockdown, when everything was properly locked down, we were having to, so members buy materials, and they were coming to collect them, and we were sort of passing them through the door and things. But it's just nice to see the studio being used and presses being used, and a bit of a buzz really. It's
and having that purpose again as an amenity.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
And are you hoping to start workshops again before too long?
Yeah, we're planning little bits here and there, but I think we're not sure if it's going to be more digitally based. Certainly the editioning not the sorry, the education room that we use for most courses is probably too small at the moment for things that we'd have to put in place, health and safety wise. So that's on hold a little bit. I think there's talk of more digital based stuff. So we email, sending out packs of materials and doing stuff over Zoom. Really, we're just waiting to see how things are going. What with the talk of yet another a third wave of and another lockdown, it's kind of doesn't make sense to put a load of time and effort into preparing stuff for it then to fall through.
What about you personally for your own work? Do you think you will be able to do more now that things are getting restrictions are being eased?
I certainly hope so. I've been doing little bits here and there when I've been off and when the studio's been quiet. I normally do a couple of print fairs a year. I did have one that was going to happen in September, which unfortunately has fallen through. But it means that I had a couple of plans for editions that I didn't think I'd managed to get finished by September. So it means that I can get more stuff done, and that stuff can hopefully go to the print fair when it happens.
And do you, as a printmaker, is that one of your main avenues of selling your own work? Print fairs?
So through my website and mainly print fairs, I tend to do 2 or 3 a year, and it tends to be print focused print fairs. So Printfest in Ulverston, which is normally May, first bank holiday in May, and the Hepworth does a really good print fair, and the Sheffield print fair is also a really great print fair as well.
Have they managed to continue on a digital platform, or have they just completely shut down for the time being?
Hepworth did a digital type event, which I think was quite successful. Printfest has decided to delay until next year, and I think there might be word about Sheffield Print Fair coming up, so I'm not quite sure about that one.
And thinking to the future, we've looked back at how you got into creativity and how you got into printing, but looking ahead to the future, where do you think you would like to see yourself in sort of 5 to 10 years' time?
Really, I just want to become a better printmaker. So just learn more, basically. I'm not sure how ambitious it is, but I just want to continue making and continue developing my practice, really. Just being creative in this world's a victory, really. So just continue making.
That the affording yourself the opportunity to be creative and I think working in the industry that you do work in, and like we were talking about before, when you work with other printmakers, it's always different. Every day is different. The outcomes are always different. So I guess it's not being unambitious, but it's just enjoying what you do to the point where there's no need to, perhaps change what you do.
Really very happy where I am and how things are at the moment. So just to be able to continue is quite a luxury, really, and continue to develop my practice.
What sort of advice would you give to someone who wants to follow a path into the creative industries, either in your area or another discipline?
Try and get as much experience in the area that you're interested in as much as possible, or sort of areas that are relevant to the area that you're interested in. So volunteer, if it's something, say, like being a studio technician, shadow a technician in university or printmaking technician in university. Just keep going with your practice with making. When you stop a thing, it's very hard to start again. So just the act of keep going is really helpful. And even if it's just a really small amount of work every now and again, it's that just helping to keep things ticking over is always good. I always found that the technicians in universities are often very helpful and very knowledgeable. So if you're in higher education, befriend your technician and try not to ask for help with a project a day before it's due. It tends to always...
It doesn't go down well.
No. But yeah, they're great fonts of knowledge, so just really tap into that. Be really aware of the field that you're interested in, I guess. So look at it from different perspectives.
Are there any printers festivals? Because you talk about there's the Print Fest where it's about the artists, but are there any other particular print festivals that you would suggest people go to if they're interested in printmaking?
It's often worth keeping an eye out because there's always good little bits of printmaking popping up here and there. If it's print that you're particularly interested in, there's some really great museums that have printmaking collections. So if you email them and say you're interested and you're looking at a particular thing, you can view those prints. So when I was at Manchester, I went to the Whitworth Art Gallery, which is mainly textiles based, but they have a really fantastic print collection. So I was able to hold Rembrandt prints and Hokusai's and things like that. So there's really great resources in these museums that's worth tapping into.
Did you just feel like you were holding the most precious thing in the world?
They're really amazing things. The level of detail is it to be able to get so close up face with it and without any glass in the way is really quite remarkable. And there was a couple of Picasso prints, a couple of Dove prints, and a real fantastic collection.
Are they a gallery's quite open to people coming in to do that if you're there for a specific purpose, if you're like from a university or an educational institution?
Well, it's often the case that some of their funding comes from engaging with the public,
right,
and engaging with academia. So, say if you're doing a degree or doing a master's, it's if you email the gallery and say I'm doing a master's, I'm interested in this. Could I have a look at your print collection? It's often that they're very very helpful and very friendly.
Oh, so, yeah, that's good to know. That's good to know. I guess shy Burns getting out. You don't know if you don't ask.
Exactly that.
And I think that's come through again from a lot of people that I've spoken to is the ball in a roundabout way just said be curious about what you do and what you're interested in, and continue, like you said, continue asking those questions to people like the technicians who, as a teacher, I found if I can make friends with the technicians in the department and keep them on side, then my life will be easy and everything will be good, because they're just such fonts of knowledge. Like yesterday I was fitting a bathroom lock onto one of our doors and I was having to chisel out the recess for the lock to go into, the deadbolt to go into. And as I was doing it, I was thinking of the technician that I had in my very first teaching placement as a trainee teacher, and how he was going through and taught me how to make a mortise and tenon joint. And I did it exactly the same way that he taught me. And I was just thinking, oh, if only I had Alan here now to do this, it would be done in half the time and much better still. But yeah, it's being curious, I think, is the key thing if you're interested in a certain area. And even if you're not sure it's the area you want to pursue or go into, you're never going to know that for sure unless you are curious about something.
Quite often there's kind of transferable skills.
And thinking about your own work now, is there anything you would like to kind of shout about for yourself or for Northern Print? Any current projects or prints that you're working on? Any exciting things that are up and coming?
So my own work, kind of the print fairs that I normally go to are kind of on hold, so I can't really shout about them. I guess shout out my Instagram, which is inky_Mac, so MAC, which is my printmaking Instagram. My website, which is Alex McIntosh printmaker.co.uk.
We can put that on the background image so people will have that. So you're on Instagram, you've got a website.
Northern Print wise, we talked about that, the members exhibition opportunity, which I think they're wanting members to take part now. So if you are a member listening to this, get in contact with Northern Print.
Or if you want to be a member, get in touch.
Yeah. Yes, very much so. It's very easy to become a member. I think it's £52 for the year, and then you pay for any materials in the session. So we're a bit like an art gym in that sense.
Yeah. And I can highly recommend it because I've been a member for a few years, on and off for a few years now. And although I haven't used the studio regularly necessarily, every time I go in, everyone is always so welcoming and so understanding of me coming up and down the stairs going, excuse me, help me, please. And everyone's been so welcoming, and it's such a lovely environment to come into. And it's not scary at all, which I was a bit anxious about coming into this environment that was for printmakers. And I'm like, well, I'm not a printmaker, I'm just new at this. But yeah, I think you at Northern Print, you go kind of above and beyond to try and make people welcome, no matter what their background, whether they're brand new or a seasoned printer, which is lovely.
And as part of the membership, we you get an induction to whichever area you have experience in printmaking. We do ask that if you want to become a member, you have a little bit of experience in printmaking. So it might be the case that you've done some at college or university, or that you've done one of our courses. We are, like you say, really friendly. We're really keen for you to feel comfortable and happy in the space, and we don't mind asking questions or technical queries. It's why me and Helen, the other technical studio technicians, are just keen to help, really.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you so much, Alex, for your time today. It's been great talking to you. And it's been, it's so interesting to hear people's answers to the questions and see where the similarities are across the board of creativity in general, and then the more specific answers about your disciplines and your areas. And I think with it being quite a niche area as well,
very much so.
I guess if you're a young student coming out of school and maybe doing A-levels and GCSEs, and you're thinking, what's next? Doing what you did, and I did something similar. I did an art foundation course where you go and try lots of different things is really, really important, because then you may be trying something that you've not done at school. Because although at A-level and GCSE you get exposed to a broad range of things, it is by no means a finite list. There's so much more out there that you can try and you can do.
It's the luxury of time. You can only know yourself by doing things and giving yourself the time to try everything.
And then, of course, going on to university and doing something more specialized. Are there many institutions that run purely printmaking degrees?
There are, yes. Scotland has a really good tradition of printmaking, and a couple of the London universities do. So LA particularly has very good printmaking.
Is that Royal Academy?
Yeah. Bristol has a very good printmaking department. I did my master's at Preston, and their print facilities are really amazing, and the technicians are top-notch and really generous with their time. There's certainly printmaking focused courses out there, probably more now so than when I was doing my degree.
Yeah. Things like that. Oh, well, that's great. That's good to know, especially for any students listening to this. So we'll definitely put your Instagram and website details and the details for Northern Print up on the background image as well for the podcast. And just look forward to coming into the studio. I'm in a couple of weeks' time, actually.
Yes, I think I noticed. It'd be great to have you in the studio.
Yeah, I can't wait. That's great. Thanks very much, Alex.
No worries.
Thanks for listening to the Storyboards Creativecast. I hope you'll join me for the next one. Don't forget you can find us on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter to keep up to date with all our latest information and events. Why not subscribe to our YouTube channel as well? You can also email us at info.thestoryboard@gmail.com.